Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Sunday morning. The fellas already looking towards the next week's slate in a massive matchup in the SEC as Georgia, Florida square off. And I didn't have this on my bingo card heading into the season. You're looking at two of the best quarterbacks in the SEC squaring off here. Carson, Beck, Mertz playing phenomenal football. And I think what makes this matchup even more exciting is both of these teams coming off a bye. They'll be at their best form. And I get Georgia without Brock Bowers, but I don't think people realize how banged up Georgia was and like a lot of guys playing through some of these injuries. Both of these teams coming into this matchup as healthy as you'll see them, you're going to see their best football. And both teams playing really good football here lately. So really excited to get into it. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support for all of these game breakdowns, it truly does mean a lot. We have a blast doing these, but the support from you guys, it's been amazing. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly for this one, get it going in the comment sections. Picks, predictions, keys to the matchup. We'll chop it up there. Appreciate y'all rocking with the boys. Dale going to give you the T-box here. Florida, Georgia. How are we feeling here?
I mean, I think you kind of said it right. I think you do have two of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, especially as Mertz has really cranked his game up. I feel like he looks a little more composed and comfortable in the pocket, and isn't making as many mistakes and taking.
I'll tell you what it is, and we talked about it with the Florida fans. They're letting Mertz off the leash. I think both of these programs are letting their quarterbacks off the leash. I think you saw both of these teams come into the season, try to make it easy on the quarterbacks, and now you're saying, hey, we got two good quarterbacks here, let them off the leash, and both of these guys thriving.
Yeah, and that's been a huge part of like this Florida team really start. And the problem is with Florida is you've seen two different versions. I feel like you've seen versions where they can go out and really compete with almost anyone in the conference, like how they play against Tennessee and at times, frankly, against South Carolina. And then you've obviously seen the Kentucky games where things just have kind of spiraled on them and they haven't been able to keep the train on the tracks. And against Georgia, that's going to be a key because there's going to be moments where, yeah, Georgia's going to make some plays and there's going to be adversity. That's the one thing with Florida I think you're still looking for. Like, can they bow their backs in those moments and not let the game get away from them? Because talent's a talent. They're good enough to play with, be competitive with these football teams, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, Florida can play with anyone in the country, 100%. We've seen them do that against a really good Tennessee team at home. You're right. That's been the name of the game for Florida. And quite frankly, at times this year for Georgia, too, is just consistently playing at that high level. They'll start with this Florida offense going up against this Georgia defense. And to start with Georgia's defense, like, I feel like people have Georgia, and rightfully so, on a pedestal, right? They've been the best program in college football the last couple of years. And they like to say Georgia's not playing very good football. They don't look like a national championship team. I saw somebody put them outside of their top 4 in their rankings. And it's like we expect Georgia to come out and dominate every single game, win 75-0. You look at Georgia on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, top 8 in the country, 15 points per game given up, 4.3 yards per play. That's top 10. They're 25% on third down conversions. That's also number 1 in the country. Dill, this Georgia defense, like, as much as people want to nitpick what you're seeing from the Bulldogs, this has still been a really good team.
Well, and that's the thing. When you see Georgia give up like yards, you're like, whoa, what's wrong with Georgia's defense? Like, what, they give up yards now? And that's just, again, I think the one fundamental difference with this Georgia team is their defensive line isn't as dominant as you've seen in the past. And that's not to say it's bad. It's obviously a very good unit still, but they're just not totally smothering teams in the way I think we've seen it.
Kirby said it in the offseason, like going in SEC Media Days, probably his most famous quote. We don't have a game record up front this year. I mean, they've been extremely spoiled, right? Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, blanking on his name, Devontae.
Two a year, 2 or 3 a year who are like legitimate high level pros. And right now you just don't see that guy who's like, oh, that's a top 10 pick running around on the field, just wreck it. You're right. That's been the one difference to me, but everything else, it still feels really solid. And they're still
even when you do look at that defensive line, like, there's still guys they're NFL dudes. It's a top defensive line in the country. It's just not like, it is lacking that Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis kind of game record player. But you look, and we said in the offseason, like, the strength of this unit is in the back end, right? Really good linebacker plays from Dumas Johnson, Smell Munden. But the secondary, you take a look at their numbers and you watch the film and see how they play. 54% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks, top 10 in the country, 5.2 yards per pass. That's top 5 in the country. Teams are struggling to even complete balls, and if they do, they're coming up and tackling. Safeties, Malachi Starks, Javon Bullard, dogs. Lassiter, Tyke Smith, Dalen Everett, the cornerbacks, like all five of those guys I just named, they're going to be playing in the NFL. The strength of this unit we're used to saying is up front. It's still damn good up front, but you look at that secondary, very, very good. Now, looking at this Florida offense, trying to find ways they can move the ball. Dill, I'm going to put you in Billy Napier's shoes. You're calling the plays. How are you attacking this Georgia defense here?
And honestly, to me, what you've seen work against Georgia is kind of, again, being able to use some misdirection and keep these linebackers from playing really hard downhill. Because when you let those two kind of, Smellmund and Dumas Jackson play, the way you've seen Georgia linebackers play that downhill in your face ball, they're so good. I think the one team that was able to kind of do some different things was Auburn in terms of using the QB run and using some read options and in RPOs. I thought that was the one thing that, man, it was like that kind of worked. And you look at Florida, that's the one question I think I have is they really don't have that option. Graham Mertz is not the athlete I think that Auburn was throwing at them at quarterback.
But I think they got, I mean, here's a trivia, and Florida fans fact check me in the comment section. Saw this stat on Twitter. The Florida Gators, #1 in the country in pre-snap motion. So I completely agree with you. Like, this Georgia defense wants to play downhill, wants to smother you. What's the best way to counter that? Some screens, some misdirections, attacking the perimeter. Like, that's where you saw Auburn, who, again, limited success, but had some success, maybe getting to the boundary. Florida's going to try to do that. And now, although Graham Mertz is not necessarily the athlete that Robbie Ashford or Peyton Thorne was for Auburn, they got some guys who can do that, right? You talk about a true freshman in Eugene Wilson, who in my mind is an absolute X factor in this game. You talk about attacking the perimeter, making Georgia tackle in space, trying to win with some speed. Though Eugene Wilson, couldn't think of a better guy in the SEC to do that than the true freshman Eugene Wilson, who I think is going to play a massive part.
They've started to do a better job of getting him involved, not just in traditional passing attacks, but using him in screens, swinging it out to him, giving him the ball in the handoff. I think you're kind of right. Like, given that Graham Mertz can't necessarily be that guy to put these linebackers in conflict, they'll probably need to rely on a Eugene Wilson or and do something like that, because he is their X factor weapon. He's the guy who, at least to me, has given them a change of flavor, if you will. And that's not to say Florida can't move the ball in a more traditional sense, because right now, the way Graham Mertz is playing and some of their tight ends are playing, they've been really effective doing that. But I do think against Georgia, they are going to need to mix in some things to get these linebackers just hesitating a little bit, or at least slow them
100%. Down. Now, two things. 2 weeks ago, you asked me, how is Florida going to move the ball on Georgia? I would have been like, I ain't sure, right? But after you saw what they did against South Carolina, this offense is coming together. One, Billy Napier not nearly as stubborn as, we're just going to run the football. We're just going to run the football because that's our identity. That would not work against Georgia. Like, they are way too good up front to be that one-dimensional and try to just out-muscle them up front. Two, so you're letting Graham Mertz off the leash, attacking downfield. That is a massive, massive upgrade. What you saw from that South Carolina game, massive optimism. Two, they know who the playmakers are now. And it ain't a secret, right? Ricky Pearsall, you knew was that wide receiver one. He's emerged as a legitimate wide receiver one in the SEC conference, who I was wrong about. I thought he was like an average wide receiver one in the SEC. He's above average. He's a dude. You find Eugene Wilson, they're starting to be like, yep, he's our guy. We got to get him balls in different ways. Arliss Bordenham, another guy that, again, they're finding their guys who are going to be making plays for this offense. It's a massive storyline, and they still have two great running backs, Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, who needs more carries. If he's right, I don't think that carry discrepancy should be 50-50. I think Etienne is the guy that offers a little bit more juice. One question I have is pass pro. This Florida, it's going to get better as they get more talent in there. That's probably their weakest link right now, and this is a Georgia team that, although not sacking the quarterback at a high clip right now, they create a lot of havoc. They create a lot of pressure. If you're looking at Florida pulling this upset off, the pass protection, hopefully they're a little bit more healthy up front. It needs to take a step.
Yeah, and that I kind of agree with you, because I just don't see them running the ball consistently enough to be able to they're going to need to hold up in obvious pass downs, I think, at the end of the day, because again, their rushing attack really hasn't been incredible. I think.
Well, they got to stay out of those obvious. They got to stay out, and that's what they did against South Carolina. You cannot be in third and long against this Georgia team. It's too talented up front. We've talked about it. Florida did a much better job staying out of that lately. if they find themselves in 3rd and 10 plus and taking those negative plays, like it's going to be a long day. All right. Let's take a look at this Georgia defense going up against Georgia offense going up against a Florida defense that has been really good at times, not so great at times. Though the big storyline for Georgia is someone's got to step up. Brock Bowers, obviously, with the ankle. How do you think this Georgia offense looks without their best player on offense?
And that's obviously a huge loss because he has been their guy to dig them out of holes or when they've needed plays in those big situations. He's obviously who they go to. But I do think people are underrated, like saying like the sky's falling. I frankly think that this wide receiver group's been playing as good as I've seen a wide receiver group at Georgia in a while. I think Rosemy St. Jackson is playing, or Rosemy Jackson, I should say, is playing awesome. I think he needs more touches. You see, he's getting a lot of yards. I mean, he's got over 300 yards on the season.
Yeah.
So he's getting the ball downfield. I really like what Ra Thomas is doing too. And frankly, as you kind of lose Brock Bowers, you need Ladd McConkey to, I think, start taking some of that work in the middle of the field and some of that Brock Bowers like money down play, because he's been a guy now for a couple of years that I think Georgia's been able to go to in huge moments, and he's been able to come up clutch for them. So as they need him to get healthy now, as Brock Bowers is going to be out for a little bit.
I feel like people forget, like Oscar Dell is still one of the better tight ends. He's still very good. Brock Bowers, no, not yet. It might not ever will be. But Oscar Delp is still a guy. And Dominic Lovett, again, 31 catches. He's been a go-to guy that they want to get the football into their hands. My story here is you've seen Florida not be great against the run. Though Georgia has not necessarily found its absolute stride running the football yet, but they haven't been very healthy, right? And Marius Mims may be back from the ankle injury that he had. That would be a massive jolt for that offensive line. Going back to the injuries, and Dejon Edwards, Kendall Milton, they have been clearly dinged up this season. Like the juice hasn't really been there. They've still been good, maybe not Georgia standard great. If they're healthy and looking a little bit better, they're able to run the football at a higher clip. I think that's a massive story. But
that starts a lot with their offensive line playing a little more physical than like that's another unit where you kind of expect such big things that you had a bunch of really good players, Van Pran, and obviously Amarius Mims goes down, but you still have Ratledge, guys who are NFL football players. I think that unit needs to they got to take their level up now and be able to run the football.
And I feel like you might see that coming off the bye because again, I just feel like this team was not necessarily that healthy the first.
Also, Beck is really good off of play action, so that's another reason you got to work that in because when he can get going play action, I thought against Kentucky they really started to hit it. That's where he really started to shine, and that is part of the game. They got to be able to run it a little better. Again, health on the offensive line and at the running back spot should help, but that's a huge part. That's honestly what Georgia's always probably going to be built on to some extent is physical running attack and then being able to rip play action off of it.
And as we're like nitpicking this Georgia offense, like I feel like I got to bring up they're scoring 39 points per game, top 10 in the country, 6.9 yards per play, top 10. Like this is still like this Georgia offense has been good. Carson Beck's been great. It's just like what this Georgia team on offense, as much as we were kind of like nitpicking a little bit, still a very good unit. Looking at this Florida Gators defense, this is one of the more intriguing units in college football in my mind. And I spent so much time digging into this unit heading into the season. Florida Gator fans know how high it was, and it's been a tale of two cities, kind of like this Florida team has been, right? You've seen them play defense at such a high level, right? Going back to that Tennessee game, flying around, getting your hands on the football, creating negative plays, and then you've seen Kentucky and South Carolina to an extent as well. The Austin Armstrong, this has to be it for him. Like he's got to turn it up. You've had 2 weeks to prep for it. It's your biggest game of the season. He's a guy that likes to live a lot of different looks, a lot of different blitz packages, coverage packages. I hope he has a massive scheme. I want to start up front. Dale Princely, like this Florida team, although it's not crazy in the sack department, Princely is winning on 30% of his pass rushes, 21 quarterback hurries. They got some guys. Caleb Banks, Kelby Collins, also double digit in quarterback hurries. Can they affect Carson Beck is a storyline, and I'm really excited to see if the Gators can do it.
Yeah, and the fact that Princely's developed into that like true number one rusher, I think it's been huge for them, especially losing some of the guys they did early in the season. The way he's stepped up and kind of taken the mantle, if you will, so like I'm the guy, I think has been huge. But to me, I think these two transfer defensive tackles have made a world of difference, especially as you try to bring along some younger players like a Kelby Collins, like a Jamari Lyons or Chris McClellan. Like those guys, yeah, they're coming a little bit, but the consistency they've gotten from the 2 transfers has been huge. Like those guys have been so good, so disruptive, and it's made such a world of difference in how they're able to stop the run compared to last year. I think that to me has been the big part of why this, again, they've been inconsistent for sure, this Florida defense, but their ceiling is
it's high. And also one other thing, and you saw it rear its ugly head against Georgia last year. Like the depth just wasn't there last year. Like Georgia just, we're going to lean on you. And then in that third and fourth quarter, the floodgate's going to kind of open. Florida having some more bodies, staying fresh up front, I think is going to be a massive difference. Linebacker play, Shamar James at his peak is playing like one of the best linebackers in college football. Like, can you get that kind of Shamar James on Saturday? Scooby Williams probably can say the same thing for him as well. These linebackers.
I want to get the Tennessee game from those two again.
Yes.
And you saw, like, if they play like that, this is such a dangerous unit. I think now you've seen some games where, especially when teams start attacking them on the edge, it feels like there's been a little bit of inconsistency from those two in that department. But you know the talent's there. You've seen how good they can play when they're really on. I'd just like to see again in this type of a huge game where this is like the type of thing that defines your season as Florida. Like, yeah, you maybe aren't going to win the SEC title this year, although you have a shot. But this is the type of game that you want to win a couple of these as you kind of bring in some young guys and the talent kind of comes back up from the Dan Mullen era.
Secondary, I don't normally shout out or like I don't normally like call out like particular guys like who were having. Jason Marshall's got to play better. Like I'll just say that. Like yeah, he was a guy that you saw him in first round NFL mocks preseason. Dude with all the talent in the world, checks the boxes physically, has not been good. I just straight up like it hasn't been good. If he's got to be that guy for the Florida Gators in the back end, Jalen Kimber's been playing some good ball. Jordan Casteel's a true freshman doing his thing in the back end. This secondary can be good. I feel like they're missing that lockdown cornerback. If Jason Marshall coming out of the bye, they can get back to that form and be what we expect him to be. Massive story for the Florida Gators. Dale, I feel like we've touched every inch of this game here. I'll give you the pick here. Georgia, 17-point favorites. Who are you taking here?
I think I like Georgia. I think Carson Beck's playing at such a high level. I think people think like, oh, Brock Bowers is out. This offense is going to fall apart. You got to replace some production. But again, I think they have the talent at wide receiver in a way I don't think they've had in a long time. And Carson Beck, honestly, is giving them something down the field that another part of just an element of this game that I don't think we kind of expected from Georgia. I'll take them. And again, there's also a part of me that from Florida, the consistency on defense, especially, is just, I have some questions, and then I have some questions about how they're going to deal with this unit up front because I don't think that's been
that's a massive. So I'm gonna take Florida to cover the number. I don't know if I'm picking Florida outright and win this game. I think it's going to be closer than most people think, and the reason is, and that my biggest question mark is this Florida offensive line pass protecting against this Georgia defensive line. Don't get me wrong. This Florida team is starting to figure it out. And I mean figure it out, not with the personnel, but the winning. And, we knew it was talented. Like they have a lot of good players. They haven't been consistent playing winning football. I think that South Carolina game on the road, massive. Going into the bye week, you're starting to see this team start knowing and figuring out how to win some football games. I think that's massive. I think you're going to see the best version of Florida. Will it be enough to outright win this game? Not sure, but I do think this one is going to be close, especially with missing Brock Bowers. I do want to see what this Georgia offense looks like without that guy. Really excited for this one. I think it's going to be a phenomenal game. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let us know in the comment section as well how you guys are feeling about this one. Rivalry game. Talk a little junk in the comment section. The boys are here for it. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.